I love to cook at home, and having good kitchenware makes all the difference in the world. Not only does good equipment make prep and cooking easier, but it makes it more enjoyable. This is why both Joel and I are huge fans of Made in Cookware. Their wide range of cookware, from pots and pans to knives and flatware and even glassware, are designed to be professional quality for right in your home. Joel is a big fan of their knife sets, and I just upgraded all of our stock pots and saucepans to Made in stainless steel ones. This goes along with my many other stainless steel, carbon steel pans that I have. I have over a dozen pieces, and I absolutely swear by Made In's products. Next, I'm getting a set of beer glasses. Yes, beer glasses for the whole podcast crew. Take your home cooking to the next level by upgrading your cookware by going to unitedwedrink.com/madein. That's MADEIN. Find out why pros like Grant Achatz, Sean Brock, Nancy Silverton, and Eric Repair trust Made In. Go to unitedwedrink.com/madein. That's MADEIN, and upgrade your kitchen and cooking today. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour, more like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another new episode of the United We Drink podcast, right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and really wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich. I'm going to be joined by our two co-hosts in just a minute. Yes, Joel Codner will be here. I don't think he actually is going to talk about the Batman or Marvel or anything for movie related, for that matter. Kevin Abbott will also be here, and I'm sure that he will be honored and privileged to be on the show like he always is. But we actually have a guest on this episode, and I'm really excited about this. We have Joe Pye from BrowardBeer.com, a local South Florida beer blog that's a little different. It's not your typical beer blog. I know when a lot of people think of beer blog, you probably think of people reviewing beers, reviewing maybe bars, breweries, and whatnot. Joe does some of that, but he really likes to write about what is going on in the Tri-County area, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade County with the breweries. And he actually comes from a journalistic background, so he has a different take and a different approach to beer writing than probably just someone like me who used to write a beer blog. So I was really excited to get into this conversation because journalistic integrity and beer writing and beer news reporting is something that I really like, and I think that lacks in our industry, especially in the South Florida market. So sit back, relax, and I hope that you enjoy this week's episode, our conversation with Joe Pye of BrowardBeer.com.
So, as Mike has described in the open that none of us heard because he's doing that separately. That's how the sausage is made, everybody. We are talking with friend Joe Pye, a friend of mine who I've known for a little while. I don't know if you guys had the pleasure of meeting Joe previously, but Joe runs a site called BrowardBeer.com. And Joe kind of came on my radar as a brewer in South Florida that's trying to promote our brands and get out there on the blogs, on the internet to get out there in front of the public. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk about here, and there's a lot of things we can get into, is particularly about journalism in beer. And I think that we have a very juvenile industry in a lot of ways. And I loved Joe's kind of perspective on things and how he was able to present himself in a manner that I thought was a little more than just going at breweries and saying, hey, can I have a bunch of free beer so I can rate your beer, which is what we get 99.9% of the time. That's enough of that from me. Joe, I'm really interested. To take it back a little bit farther, what got you into craft beer in the first place?
First off, thanks for having me, guys. Boy, that is a really interesting question. I knew I was going to be asked that. And, just going back in time, I've always been a beer drinker. I think back, historically when I was a kid, I knew so many people. My dad was, a big Miller High Life drinker. Most people I knew drank Bud Light. Keggers were big back when I was in high school, and it was, super cheap to get a keg of, Bud Select. But my first experience with beer that I could say that actually had flavor to it, I remember when I was around 17 years old, a buddy of mine who was a little bit older, he brought over a 6-pack of Hoegaarden, and I was like, wow, this is different, this beer, it's not just your standard macro, micro or whatever, like lager beer. And then I guess a couple years later, I started drinking stuff like Magic Hat. I started seeing that in grocery stores, Flying Dog, Shipyard. But at that point though, I kind of drank what I could afford. And I'm sure as you guys kind of know, craft beer isn't exactly a cheap product at least for a younger 19, 20-year-old guy. And I didn't go to college right away, right? So I kind of just worked odd jobs and just drank what I could afford. I really got into craft beer thanks to my wife. When we first started dating, she would hang out at the Funky Buddha, the Boca Lounge. She would hang out at the Mac House in Davie. And to me, these were we would go out on a date or something like that, and he'd be like, "Whoa, shit, this is $9 a beer." And then, but I started drinking it, and I really kind of just fell in love with there was something different here, And then basically when I left school, I got my first job out of college, and I just had more disposable income, I suppose. And I started hanging out at more breweries. And as I hung out at more breweries, I kind of caught on that you read about breweries in newspapers basically when they open, when they have a 1, 3, 5, or 10 year anniversary. Maybe sometimes when they do something really huge, they do some kind of big benefit or something, and then when they close, and that's about it. I'm not putting down the writers at those newspapers. They're swamped in those entertainment sections with the work they have to do. But there's so much that goes on in craft beer that people just don't really pay attention to. And further from there, I found other blogs and other bloggers and podcasts and whatnot. And you already kind of covered, a lot of these people are just kind of cheerleaders of the industry in many ways. You're talking about journalism in the industry. I feel it's almost non-existent. I say that, but also I'm a huge fan of Good Beer Hunting. That is a publication that I do feel journalistically covers the industry. They're fair, they're unbiased, they will cover things that some people be uncomfortable by. But for the most part, though, it's a lot of influencers and a lot of people who are just kind of looking for free beer and festival tickets and, ways to, I guess, become popular in a crowd of people. And I come from a journalism background. I just felt it's so much more important to the beer industry to grow as a whole to have someone to actually cover it journalistically, to do it without any conflicts of interest and without any kind of biases in their coverage and whatnot. So that's kind of what I started doing. And, it was about 2 years ago. I've been doing it ever since.
So to tell a little story, and like I said, there are a lot of people out there that you can get your as you said, your anniversary party out to, and a lot of people that are contacting you on a regular basis when you are at a brewery. And we met and we got along. We talked a little bit about some of the history, craft beer, whatnot. But the thing that really struck me was when you came to a can release of ours, and I said, oh, yeah, come by. You're going to write this up and kind of promote it. And I said, no, I'll get you a 4-pack of beer. And you said, no, thanks. I'll be good. I can buy my beer. And it was just peculiar to me because I'd never had anybody ever offer to write about our brewery. And I know you were taking it from a journalistic standpoint and saying, I'm going to talk about what's going on in the industry. But I had never experienced that before. And it kind of struck me. And we got a chance to talk later on, a year or so later. Maybe it was only 6 months later. I can't remember. And I kind of asked you about that because we are so conditioned to somebody wants something from you for anything you get, and that entire mentality of I just want to be famous. I just want pictures of myself drinking beer on Instagram. And I really appreciated your kind of like hard take on journalism and beer. I'm interested in you guys, Joel and Mike. Mike, you ran a beer blog back in the day. It's one of the early ways you got into craft beer. We all have very strong feelings when it comes to our industry and professionalism. What do you guys see in? Do you see the same thing that we're talking about here as far as professionalism? And isn't it a breath of fresh air to the idea that we could be professional in our industry?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I admire the what's the word I'm looking for here? Journalistic integrity. I mean, Christ, we get asked for everything from free beer all the way down to stickers and coasters from people in Europe and places you've never heard of. So, I didn't get to say earlier, but just to go back, beer was $9 at the Funky Buddha Lounge because Kevin couldn't stop putting tons of shit in it.
5 pounds of fruit in a 5-gallon batch, man. There's no better way to go.
But I digress. No, there are some bloggers that I do know personally, and I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of thoughtful content out of them because it's just like, here's the latest review, and there's like zero negativity, and it's not like I'm going for the negativity, but there's no balance. It's just all positive all the time. And I can understand that from one angle, because, you want to keep it positive and focus on the good things, but it also just feels slightly dishonest.
I think that what he's doing is fantastic. I was a blogger, but I was more of that cheerleader rah-rah when I started off. What?
Homer.
But the thing, I stopped really blogging once I got into the industry, and I tried to pick it back up here and there, but by doing something different, and I didn't want to report the news, but I also didn't want to just write reviews, so I tried to come up with interesting stuff, and I just couldn't hold my attention with work and life and all of that. But I too am a big fan of good beer hunting. I think that Kate Bernat over there has been putting out some of the best stuff in beer writing over the last year and a half, and writing about stuff that is difficult and hard for people to hear and read, and I love it. I actually came across your site. I think it was sometime last year. A former coworker sent me a link to one of your posts about the owners of Holy Mackerel brand, and the amount of work that you put into that was incredible. It was a breath of fresh air for especially a South Florida writer, and I didn't know at the time about your journalism background, so I just thought this was a hell of a lot of work to put into writing a blog post by someone who's I was just oh, it's a blogger. But Kevin told me that this is your career and this is your life, and it all made sense to me at that point in time. I was really impressed by that work, and I'm really happy that you are doing that type of stuff here in this industry and in South Florida.
So to jump in here, can you tell us a little bit about that story, Joe?
Yeah, definitely. It is kind of interesting. I'm thank you for saying that, because a lot of people often just read what you do and they just think oh, you just wrote it. It took 30 minutes. And it took I had to go down to the city and get public records. I had to talk to a lot of people, and I'm sure as you guys kind of know, like in the industry, you may want to talk about something, but you don't want your name attached to it, right? So like there were a lot of brewery owners that I spoke to, and a lot of people who work in breweries who talked to me for that story, and they were like, dude, I'll talk to you, but like it has to be off the record. It has to be on background. And some of the sources were so close to that brewery that if they ever found out, they would just be pissed. Like, that's as far as I can really say about that, though, because I will protect those sources.
As you should.
You know, going back to even like you were talking about earlier, like with what got me into craft beer, Holy Mackerel Panic Attack was one of the first craft beers that I ever tried that really like blew me away. So the brand itself, it's just unfortunate what has happened. I wish that good things would come from that. You know, they own all the equipment. They have the green light from the city. The one day that really pissed me off the most in reporting this, because it took months of reporting, was there's this like Facebook group called the Flirty and Beer Society, and one of the owners was saying like they got questioned by one of the group members like, why aren't you guys brewing beer yet? And he's like, you know, we're not yet. Like the city won't let us. We're not legal to do it. All this bullshit. And it was like I had literally just gotten off the phone with someone who was very close and was like, no, they're totally legal to do everything. I didn't like that you're just lying to your customers at that point. Like, just say you don't know what you're doing. just say it. Like, you know? So, and then I did talk with the owner. It's not like it was like a one-sided thing. Because just recently this came up, a beer that I just made with another brewery where they were like, you were referred to as a gossip column. And that is like the greatest compliment to a real journalist. Someone criticizes the work you've done and called you a gossip column because you've got nothing else. But yeah, I mean, like I talked to, it was like 12, 13 different sources. The funny thing about that story too, and what really tipped me off, people had told me about them, but I was like, you know, who really cares? That guy, the main subject in the story, Frank Barasich, during COVID, basically I started the blog in February of 2020. A month later, as you guys know, everything got shut down. So I was like, damn, my blog is done. Like, I mean, all this news that's going on in the craft beer industry, what is the news? Everything's closed. So what I started doing was I was compiling where everyone was selling their to-go beers, and I would make this list and update it every single day with just every brewery in the Tri-County area. What they're selling it for, where you can go buy their beer, just any craft beer bar, any brewery. All these small businesses were impacted by this. It's a little thing that I could do, and I was actually like paying for promotion over social media with it. And the guy, Frank Barasich, the owner of Holy Mackerel, copy and pasted and plagiarized my thing in this like Facebook group that he has with like 70,000 followers. But I didn't catch on until like months later. And the day that I did catch on, I called him out for it because I was like, this has been going on forever. This guy's just taking credit for this like list that I created, and it took a lot of time. And I noticed that on the list he had actually commented, how did we get Holy Mackerel on there? So here's the weird part. Everyone on Facebook and social media knows this guy is Frank Baugh. But then I see his actual full name on the comment list on my post and my website, Frank Barasich. So immediately I'm like, who the hell is Frank Barasich? So I Google Frank Baugh, and then I Google Frank Barasich. Frank Baugh is a clean Google page. There's nothing really bad about it, whatever. The Google page for Frank Barasich is all of a sudden there's this like federal reports from the FBI and shit of this guy getting busted for fraud and this weird like scheme that he pulled in like Luxembourg. And I'm like, what the, like, this is just crazy, man. So then I really started like digging in, and like basically what I gathered up is that this guy didn't want to tell all the business owners he deals with because obviously it's not good for him to make money later on. And when I did actually finally get the interview with Frank, I asked him about that. He just didn't want to comment at all. So, you know, in journalism, when someone doesn't want to comment, that is their comment. So I don't, to this day, really know the details other than the press release from the FBI exactly what happened with that whole fraud scheme. But from the look of it is that he did it like a year in prison, and when he got out, he just kind of got into the craft beer and restaurant scene and the marketing thing. He has an app. A lot of stuff didn't go into the story because it just didn't fit with the story of itself. But like, to this day, people still come up to me and talk to me about him and are like, Frank tried to get me to do the Let's Go app or whatever, and I said no. And my whole thing is that, like, look, if you choose to do business, I know a lot of breweries, even a brewery that I just worked on a beer with, they're going to join his festival coming up. That's fine. My whole thing that I always say is that, like, you should just know who you're dealing with. That's all. That's all journalism is. I have no power in this world. I have no, like, I can't make people make decisions. But same thing as, like, as a consumer, as you should just be educated on what's going on in the world around you. And that's the great thing about journalism in the First Amendment is that, like, people can know. In another country around the world, you don't really have what we have here in the United States. When you write a story, even over in England as a journalist, if someone claims libel against you, it's basically you're guilty until proven innocent. In the U.S., you are innocent until proven guilty. So, like, the onus is on the mixing my legal jargon right now, but the person who is filing the suit, they have to prove the damages, you know? So it's like, anyway, there's nothing in that story that is worthy of that, and I would love it. To this day, I would love for that to happen, for a suit to be filed. But, like, because it would just be something to actually talk about. It's, the best you can do in that situation is call me crazy, as that happened at the time, to call it a gossip column, and like, that's really it, man. Everyone knows now. So it's like, look, did their business go under? No. But, like, do people know what's going on? Yeah, and that's important. And maybe he grows as a human being. Maybe he stops doing the shady things that he did in the past. Like, that is really, like, I'm not a cop, you know what I mean? I'm a journalist. All I can do is write and put the information out there. People make their decisions past there. A lot of people still to this day get angry and they'll comment on things that I write about, like, why don't you write about holy mackerel? Well, I've reached out to them since, and I'm like, if you guys ever do start brewing, I'll write that story too. When they've had events, I, for a brief time, was running an event calendar, which I would love to bring back. I would add their events, their happy hours and stuff like that. I don't have any personal grudges against anybody. But I just do believe that, like, you know, customers should kind of know better. And that's all that comes down to, you know, like, I was shocked how big that story ended up being. People to this day, I don't even know you, Mike. What you just said to me about how you found that out, that story a year ago, people come up to me at breweries all the time and are like, dude, you wrote that story? I thought you were like 50 years old. Like, not that I was like, you know, like, I'd just been doing this forever or something like that. So I didn't know it got out there that far. So that's, I don't know, thank you for saying that. It's just a huge compliment. All this time later, like, I mean, that it matters to people. Like,
Holy Mackerel is one of those kind of OG South Florida brands. Like, they weren't like a brewery, but that brand existed for, like, before I even got into beer in 2008. Kevin?
I just got an idea for an entire podcast, guys. Write this down, Mike.
Okay. Joel, unmute Kevin.
I didn't do that, and I don't have an option to unmute him.
It said that Joel Codner muted Kevin Abbott.
Am I
yeah,
here?
You're back. All right. Cool.
I hope you have great editing software on this one. What I was getting into was I had a great idea for a podcast just coming off of what you just said there, Mike, is that when we first started getting into brewing down here, all the brands that were local were saying, oh, you know, this is brewed in Jupiter, Florida. It was actually brewed in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And this is a local brand. It's not brewed anywhere near Florida. We should talk about that at some point in the future.
I'm for that.
One of the things, Joe, that comes out of what you were kind of saying there that really strikes me is that it's really hard for people to take an objective point of view when it comes to a news story, when it comes to anything that they care about. It's really hard to feel like you're not attacking somebody. And then to turn back around and say, listen, I'll post about your happy hours. I wasn't trying to sink your business. I was trying to inform the public. And as a business owner, you know, divorcing those two things, if you read an expose about something about Barrel Amongst Brewing, it would be hard for me to compartmentalize those things. I hope that I'm the kind of person that could do such a thing, but I also respect the fact that you would turn around and say, hey, listen, I'll work with, I will write a story about you starting to brew because that's newsworthy and something that's worthy to print because there's no animosity here. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and, you know, like, yeah. I mean, that's all it comes down to. I don't know if I'll ever get that response. And it is what it is at that point, you know. And it's not that there's a problem with contract brewing either.
No.
Like,
No,
that's
not
not
at all.
the problem. There's a lot of brands out there that do contract. The weird thing, though, is to have the kind of equipment. Like, I know guys who are like this guy Hader I know. He's doing this brand called Shoujo. He can't afford to open a brewery right now, so he's doing everything on contract. But he is a brewer, and if he had the money and he had the, like, I don't know if you guys have been in the Holy Mackerel Wilderness or like location, but they have, I took a 15 or 17 barrel system. Like, they have stuff that, like, you know, I know a lot of these guys, like Davey over at Orchestrated Minds or like Dan over at like Yeasty Brews. They're on really small systems because that's what they can afford to do. If you guys can afford to do this kind of stuff, then fucking fire up the system and just go to work. But you can't do that because you don't actually know anything about this industry. And it's weird, man. It's like, because there's nothing wrong with contract brewing. We all know it's part of the Brewers Association. But, like, it's very just weird to own the equipment. That's where it becomes this thing of, like, well, what's the point then? So, because I know the brand you're talking about. When you're saying the people in Jupiter or whatever, they're at a Pompano now. I don't know the details of that brand, but, like, you know, if that's what the guy wants to do, that's what he wants to do. You know, Poppy Gordash was doing Holy Mackerel for a very long time because he just couldn't open the place. And when he did, like I was saying before earlier, I used to go to the Mac House in Davie when that was the Holy Mackerel bar. So that brand has been around. It is that OG Florida craft beer brand. And it's just like, I don't know, if it's going to live on, I would hope that it would evolve over time and become a better brand and not be something out of South Carolina.
Well, I'd like to move on to some positive stuff. Not that this isn't positive. I don't want to actually pitch that way because that sounds like what we're talking about is negative. No, these are realities of our industry, and I like the fact that you're trying to talk about those things. But you recently worked with 26 Degree to do a collaboration beer with some of the proceeds, and you'll tell me a little more about it here, benefiting Ukraine. We spoke about this months ago, and I was happy to kind of talk with you about how this might work. I'm really thrilled because Barrel of Monks was not in a position to be able to do anything there for many reasons. I'm really thrilled that you found a partner to work with. Can you just talk a little bit about that project?
Absolutely. I wish that I had my camera on because I'm drinking the Beer for Bombs beer right now. I have the t-shirt on. But I mean, yeah, Kevin, as you already said, man, you were the first guy I hit up about that. Like, we had just had a conversation right before that I was on your Instagram thing or something like that, and we were talking about Bell's to Hardadale. So basically I'm sure you guys heard the story of Pravda. I remember hearing about it back, like, late February. A lot of beer bloggers, like, don't drink beers, and even the trolling things like Haze Boys and stuff like that were sharing around, you know, there's this image of, like, Pravda breweries, their Putin Kuilo. The Putin is a dick. Their golden strong ale or whatever is a Belgian golden ale or something like that. It's this powerful image, but, like, you don't know any more of the story, though, which is one of the reasons, going back to why I wanted to do BrowerBeer.com, is because, like, yeah, cool, man, I see this Instagram post, but, like, what's the story? So maybe, like, early March, I reached out to the Pravda Brewery Instagram account and was, like, shocked that they actually got back to me. Like, these guys are in the middle of a war. And they actually contacted me back, and I set up an interview with their PR guy, this guy, Taras Maselko. So we did an interview, and I did a story about him. And, you know, there's this fine line of, like, journalism and, like, activism. And I hate to say it, but, like, I crossed the line on this one, and I just don't care. I will unforgivably say that I feel I'm happy with that choice. Even Northwestern University, Medill College of Journalism now teaches activism in journalism. It's something that more people are getting interested in. For a cause like this, so I wrote a story. My blog only has so much outreach. I mean, I would love it to be bigger, but I'm one guy doing this one thing. I didn't get much reaction or engagement. And basically the headline that I wrote was just like, help this Ukrainian brewery, you know, help, you know, people in their country. And, I laid out that we can all donate money. This is the link to their donations. This is the link to their recipes. This is the link to all their graphics. And the story itself really got no engagement. I donated $100 that night, and I fell asleep and just couldn't stop thinking about it, you know? And then, so at my job, I don't have, like, a traditional journalism job. I work at, like, this personal finance site that hires journalists. We cover news and personal finance. That was a personal choice after college. I did not want to go work in a print media outlet. I could have worked at the Sun Sentinel or the Palm Beach Post, That is basically just like counting on the days until you don't have a job anymore. So my boss, the editor at work, is also the Region 3 director of the Society of Professional Journalists. It's the country's oldest and largest journalism organization in the country. He has this budget to do programs. One of the big things we do is like programs we set up to teach people about journalism. The programs could be anything, we've done what's called like the fake news game show. That was for a long time. We would go to restaurants, set up like a thing, and just basically like have people, we'd show 2 headlines, like which one's the fake one, and they would do a quiz on it, and we would teach them how to pick up on signs of fake news. Like there's no author behind it, right? That's a big sign of like fake news. So this program, he was like, hey man, I really love this story about this brewery in Ukraine. I'll give you money from my budget if you can find a brewery to brew their beers. Because I put out the story, no one bid on it, I didn't see any other South Florida brewery do anything for like 3 weeks. So I was like, if you're going to give me money, I'll start shopping around. And that's where, like, here's the thing, man. I might blog about beer, and I've been writing about it for like 2 years. I do not know what it takes to actually make a beer. So when I called you, Kevin, it was just like very educational. And I love that you were so honest and so cool. I didn't know if you want to talk about this tonight or not, but like, you taught me a lot in that process that like you could have potentially squeezed out some space to do a red ale. And like, I remember just thinking like, I don't really want to do that beer. I contacted a lot of other breweries who just didn't even say anything back to me. So you were really cool about like actually calling me and like telling me some of the process. I did eventually get through 226 Degree in Pompano Beach, and it just made so much sense to go with them. I don't know why I didn't think about this before, because they do a lot of contract brewing. And they have this huge 30-barrel brew house, and they have so many tanks back there. But even talking to Jonathan Gearsey, the co-owner, he does most of the business there. This wasn't also something that he was like very sure right away that we could do it. Like he was like, a lot of people love the idea of a cause beer, right? Like we all want to do something good for humanity or whatever. But like, do customers actually buy these beers? And the truth is that like, no. A lot of craft beer consumers unfortunately want to escape from reality a lot of times, and they want to party and have fun. And I totally respect that and understand that. So we decided to go with, rather than a 30-barrel, like a 30-barrel brew like he normally does, we cut it in half. So we did a 15-barrel brew, and he basically just broke it down that like we would still make a good chunk of money to donate. His whole thing was like, at first, this is also kind of funny. Sorry to get so in the weeds about this, but I wanted to give him money for the ingredients. Like I wanted to give you money for the ingredients. And he was like, well, legally, dude, you can't give me money to just brew a beer. Like that's not how this works. Like, you guys aren't licensed to brew beer or anything like that. So what we broke it down was instead that we would handle all of the marketing of it. And, with our contacts and connections through the SPJ, what we did instead was we just like, I became, rather than being a journalist this time around, I was like the PR guy. Like I was the media contact. I was hitting up journalists on a daily basis at mainstream media outlets to get this story picked up. And the goal, what we did was we brewed the Ukrainian stout because I fell in love with the idea of like, everyone knows a Russian imperial stout, right? To me, Pravda Brewery named this a Ukrainian imperial stout as kind of a fuck you to Russia. And I thought that was awesome. So, between that and I could make a story out of this is basically what I thought of this as, was like, we can, I've learned how to like create a story through like print journalism and to write stories through like web and whatnot, right? Beer cans are artwork, right? Like, I don't think that's like, we all like by this point could say it's an art form of its own. They often do silly things though, of like nostalgia labels and stuff like that. Why can't we do like a non-fiction label? Actually tell a true story through the beer label. So what we did was we tied in the SPJ angle of it, of like honoring the slain journalists who were killed covering the war. While doing that, we would raise money for Ukraine, and we would honor basically every objective that Pravda set out for, was get as much press coverage as possible, brew our beers because we can't brew them, and then donate the funds back to us to help the people in Ukraine. And we did literally all of that.
Great.
And in the end, so we had a big the big party that we threw for the can release party, we ended up raising like $6,500 between t-shirt sales and the beer itself. And I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the story of like Pravda and Corey McGinnis, their former brewer, and how he started that GoFundMe and everything. But basically that particular GoFundMe that's raised $35,000 by now, we have the largest donation in there, and that's like an international GoFundMe. So it's something I'm personally really proud of. Yeah, and the beer is great. I love it. It's not your typical stout, you know. It's surprisingly easy drinking. Yeah.
I think that that's awesome. I personally wanted to do something like that at the brewery that I work for, but it was shot down. I feel I can comfortably say that. But my boss doesn't like to ruffle potential feathers with people, so he likes to keep it straight on things, and that's fine. That is what it is. But I think that people who are chipping in on this are doing a wonderful thing. I know that Intuition Ale Works up in Jacksonville has done a couple batches of their Putin is a Dickhead beer up there. I think that it's awesome that 26 is doing it too. They did a BLM beer, not I think last year or the year before too.
Yeah,
so
that's how I met Jonathan. Yeah.
I think that that's cool that those folks are taking a stance on things that are important outside of beer.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to tell that story, and I'm glad you were able to find a partner in a really important project. That, listen, when you are operating a brewery and you have limited production space, sometimes it's really, really hard. Even if you really want to be able to do something, getting it squeezed into your schedule can be really, really difficult. And finding a good partner who's going to work with you and happy to put some money into a good cause is really important. I want to kind of switch gears, and I want to know, and this is kind of coming from a conversation that we had when we were doing that little Instagram video a few months ago. I feel like it is now. I'm very interested when someone comes from the outside of the beer industry and starts to get a kind of whether it's somebody coming in and thinking, oh, I'm going to go work as a cellarman and I'm going to be working in the beer industry and it's going to be the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then they see what it's like behind the doors. For yourself, you're doing a similar thing as being a beer fan and then getting into the journalism aspect. Is there anything that you've learned that is disturbing or that stands out to you, encouraging? I mean, you can go in a positive way with this too. I'll give you that out. But I'm interested to see what you have learned that might have been a little shocking when you kind of look into the back end of the businesses.
I mean, over the past 2 years, it's been, how do I put this the best way? It's been amazing. I've met so many great people, but like, you know, there's this old saying, I don't know if it's from Sam Calgione or who originally said it, but like, you know, like 98% of the people in beer are good people. Yeah, man, on the surface, all of us are really nice people or whatever, but like, there's just some like really, how do I put this? Like just shitty behavior. It's not necessarily the people in the beer industry. Most people I've met who work in the craft beer industry are actually pretty cool. A lot of the craft beer fans are the ones who annoy me the most. And this is just one thing, guys. There's a lot of stuff I could touch on. But like, you know, you're hanging out at a bottle share and these guys are talking about like a local brewery, just whatever brewery, I'm not going to name names, but like that brewery sucks. Well, based on what metric? You know, and it's because, well, they didn't put out that pastry stout that I like. And it's like, well, I drink pastry stouts myself. I drink all the kettle sours. I drink hazy IPAs, I've never had a bad beer except for my own oxidized homebrew, you know? But like, I sometimes feel like with some people, they identify with brands, you know what I mean? And it's like their marketing is cooler. They don't say that though. To them, they think it's just really the liquid that's better. And there's a lot of like this, like, I'll just say, you know, as it was put to me by this, we'll call him an influencer. Craft beer is like high school, which was funny to me because I feel it's like high school to a guy who went to high school 40 years ago. compared to someone like there's this popular kids crowd, and it's kind of just stupid. Most of the breweries in South Florida now are pretty good. I mean, I can't think of one that's just like, aside from people who just aren't really brewing beer, but like, most people are putting out really good beer in South Florida now. I think that we have great breweries down here, but you still have these kids. I don't know, they're adults, but like they will say things like this brewery sucks, and it's like I just don't understand that mentality. Then also some of these festivals that I go to, and they're great festivals and have a great time, and they put out some of the rarest and craziest beers and this, that, and the other thing, but like they intentionally don't invite other breweries, and it's very obvious. I don't know exactly where this started because I feel like I kind of came late to the party in craft beer, but there is definitely this like, it just seems so anti what craft beer really is to make it a cool kids thing and everybody else, because I felt like everyone who got into craft beer is kind of a misfit in one way or another. Why are people trying to distinguish this crowd from another crowd now? It's just, I don't know, man. You would think that all people in craft beer are kind of like microbreweries against like the wealthy, rich, big macro breweries. And it's like, no, there's microbreweries against other microbreweries too. And it's sad, man. And then there's a lot of like a party mentality, which I kind of got into craft beer to escape the party mentality in my 20s. And, there's a lot of people who just go out to some of these places, go out to festivals, and they just get trashed. And it's kind of, do your own thing. You're an adult. You make your own choices. But it's a little weird to see it, though, sometimes. Grown-ass men who are, like, clearly not healthy and in good shape, just chugging beers and until they fall over and piss themselves, Just, like, I understand how this became a thing. Like, it's like people, they create their identity out of craft beer and they just take it to an extreme. And that extreme becomes their identity.
Well, Joe, I think it's really interesting. I was talking specifically on the kind of the brewery side of things, and the thing that you found most shocking or scandalous or what have you is kind of the what have you done for me lately, popular kid, prettiest girl at the ball kind of mentality of the fans of craft beer. And this is a kind of conversation that I think we have here constantly on Yet We Drink. It's one of the things.
We talk about the breweries too. Something. Joel, what's the hashtag? The breweries who exclude other breweries and only hang out with their type.
Oh, hashtag craft beer circle jerk.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot more to it than that, but yeah.
Well, I guess what I was talking about. Yes, that's very true.
But there was two things going on there. It's some of those uber beer geek-y people, and then the breweries that cater to them.
Yes, and that's kind of what I was getting to, is that those things are kind of tied together, and it's all about hype, and it's all about this. We did, Joe, when I asked you on to come to do that, the video that we do every Friday for Barrel of Monks is all about great beers that are not hype beers, that are amazing, that no one cares about anymore because they're not hype beers. And it's trying to focus on the fact that these beers are still good. They're as good as they've ever been, but no one seems to care because they didn't come out yesterday and no one lines up for them. And I just find it interesting that that's one of the things that kind of sticks in my craw the most as somebody in the industry, and that you have kind of been, shown that through your lens of looking at craft beer. Joel, this is something that's, very passionate to you. These are the things that we talk about on a regular basis. Did you have anything to add when it comes to that?
How much time do we have?
It's time for a diatribe.
Oh, man. It's interesting to hear his perspective because of the timing of it all and how he got into it and how long he's been doing the blog and everything. I don't want to sound like we're all the old man yelling at the cloud, but it often appears that way just because, we've been doing this so long and have been everything from fans to servers to brewers. Kevin's an owner now, and Mike's had so many roles. I mean, he's easily the most diversified person on the show, but You know, I kind of feel like we've seen it all and not necessarily done it all, but enough to pull, you know, like the 99% asshole free myth is fortunately pretty heavily mocked in beer circles on social media lately. I mean, it's nice to see that it's not perpetuated as much as it used to be. And listen, getting into beer and especially the industry, that was one of the major appeals. I mean, for me personally, coming from 15 years of toxic office environments in corporate America, and then all of a sudden you're in this thing that's enjoyable, and you get to make things that other people enjoy, and everyone's cool, and it's all laid back, and there's no uniforms or dress code, and we can just kind of do whatever we want and have fun. Like, it's all very appealing early on, and then as you get deeper into it, you start realizing, like, oh, that's bullshit, and that's bullshit, and he's an asshole, and their beer is fucking terrible, and it's a weird journey
that we've all been on, and apparently Joe's on that journey just a little bit more expedited than some of ours.
Well, he seems to be enjoying it, and I'm glad to hear that, because I'm so fucking jaded at this point.
That's a perfect transition. Joe, are you enjoying this?
Well, and it's funny. Like, when I first started this, I was like, there's a lot of things that I could touch on, but it's like, let's just stick to one thing for now. But, yeah, I am. But this is what's like the fortunate thing, weirdly. Like, I do this whole thing and I'm not making money doing any of it. I don't work in the beer industry, and I think that's important for everybody. It's important that, like, I can objectively view what's going on. It's important for the breweries too, because, like, as we talked about with everything else so far, you're not going to get a whole lot of honesty out of, like, Instagram influencers when it comes to craft beer. Okay. And, like, I don't know sometimes what these people really want out of craft beer. Like, no one got into this industry to make money necessarily, right? Everyone, I guess, wanted to have, as Joel was talking about, like, a different experience than you have in corporate America. I also don't really have that, like, really stuffy corporate job. My job is pretty laid back. I go to work every day in a beer t-shirt and a hat. So, like, going out to these breweries, meeting a lot of these people, it is fun. But I will tell you, though, that it is also, I've learned, if you talked to me and asked me that question probably 6 months ago, I would have been a lot more fired up and angry. By now, I've kind of just learned to, like, understand what's going on and kind of classify who's who. Like, I feel like a lot of people who are into beer, like myself, like, I buy beer, I sometimes chase after the latest Osner release, right? But I will also go down to a place like Wakefield when they were doing it over the summertime was probably the last time, and I'll wait in line for the latest bottle of Big Papa. But I'll still stop in at a grocery store and buy the Tank's, La Playita Lager because I love it. I just have this hard time saying that a beer sucks. I just want to know why that beer sucks a lot of times, and the negativity and the bullshit is what kind of, like, you can see through it after a while. I don't know, man. I mean, I am still having a great time doing this. I also, being a journalist, coming from that background, a lot of anarchist people go into my profession. It's like, I kind of get a kick at it, not trolling people the way that people troll people online, but watching, when you call out someone for their hypocrisy and watching them that they don't know how to react to it, that's like, okay, then you did something that may change something later on. Because, like, if they can't say something honestly to reply back, then the whole thing was bullshit from the start. And they're just going to either address that it was bullshit from the start or just prove how crazy they are. You know what I mean? There's one or two options in that situation. The best lesson I was ever told in life was that you don't have to ever take off your shoe and bang it on a table to get your point across. Just ask questions. That's all you ever have to do is ask questions. And you will have civil conversations with people. So I hope that the further that I keep doing this with BrowerBeer.com, that more situations in craft beer start to slowly, correct themselves. I always felt that, like, and I wrote this on my bio on the About page for BrowerBeer.com, I feel that you can fix any community through journalism, and you can settle any argument over a cold beer. We're all kind of the same at the end of the day. even a lot of these people that we're probably talking about that piss us off or whatever, I've sat down and had beers with them, and they're pretty laid back and cool people. There is this business aspect, though, man. It's weird. There's this small market that's carved out for craft beer. And we might say we're all cool and everything, but it's going to get competitive. There's no way it's not, because there are only so many people in this state who drink alcohol. And then if you break down the people who drink alcohol, there's only so many people who drink beer. And then of those people who drink beer, how many of them actually drink craft beer and go to a local brewery? It gets smaller and smaller, that chunk of the pie.
About 3%.
Right. So,
well, I know I just jumped in there and kind of threw you off your rhythm. I was going to say for a second there, Joe, you were the most positive person who has ever been on the United We Drink podcast. And I applaud you for that.
What about the English guy?
What's that?
What about the English guy who told me everything
Phil
not
Clark?
so bad?
Yeah, Phil's a very positive guy. Apparently, our guests are really, really positive people. We're just curmudgeonly old men. I really appreciate that take. I love the idea of looking at every single beer and saying, well, I like meeting people where they are. Just because a beer necessarily might not be your favorite beer doesn't mean it's a bad beer. I really do appreciate that. Then going into the idea that, craft beer has a limited market and we're always fighting. This is the kind of thing that I deal with on a daily basis. And the narrative that everyone gets along and there's plenty of market for everybody is fiction. It just is. There is infighting. There are people who want other people to fail, and there are realities financially that have to be met. But I do really appreciate your positive narrative about the craft beer industry in South Florida and enjoying the beers that you've had. I do want to ask you, Joe, because we do have to wrap up here at some point. What long term is there a goal, one goal, some kind of goals that you might want to accomplish with your website and with your journalism?
I ask myself that pretty regularly, and I never have the answer. The goal has never been to make money. I've talked to even friends of mine who work in the beer industry used to, and they're like, why don't you throw like Google ads on your website? I don't want to do that to the user. I think it would look lame. For a couple of pennies, I could make off Google ads. So I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy the time that I have. Like, my wife wants to have a kid. I don't know what happens when we have that kid. If I can keep doing this blog, I hope I can.
We'll talk to you about that and give you some advice.
Hope that it's not twins.
I don't know what the goal is, man. I kind of live my life day by day. I wish I had more time to dedicate to this blog. But if I was even given the opportunity to write about beer for a living, I don't know that I'd want to do that. I mean, I briefly tried to write with Miami New Times and felt kind of, the typical, like if you worked in my industry, you'd understand like the shortcomings of that part of it. So I like the idea that I can be my own editor, I guess. And I don't know. There's freedom that like, if I don't publish a post every single day, it doesn't matter. I don't have some boss telling me like, you gotta run something. You gotta run something about this or that. I can just work on it when I want to. I can make it look as cool as I want to make it look. My favorite part about BrowerBeer.com is that like I have shaped this thing as a baby in my own image. And it looks and feels the way that I want it to look and feel. And I guess that's all I've ever wanted from it. I still have a day job. I actually have 2 day jobs, that support this. And, I don't know, man, as long as I'm always having fun doing this, I know it's kind of like, to you guys, it might be a little more stressful because you work in the industry. For me, the chaos is often the most fun that I have with this. So, but also the good times. I mean, this whole Beer for Bombs project was amazing. We did something really positive, and I was really proud of it, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do something like that without BrowerBeer.com. So, I don't know. I hope I get to do more stuff like that in the future. That's really, if I can do more philanthropic work and giving back. I mean, as long as I don't take any money away from this in the end, and can always do something to help people have a better day, I don't know, man. That would be my goal with it.
Well, that's excellent, man. I really appreciate the time you spent with us. And I have a quick question, and
I
then
do too.
believe Mike then has a question, and then we're going to go into the wrap up this whole thing. But I want to know, because you appreciate craft beer in a way, and you do follow some of the trends, but still appreciate some of the classics. Is there one style of beer, and it could be a particular beer in general, I'm talking about like a brand from a particular brewery, if you could wave a magic wand and convince everybody to love this style or this particular beer, what would it be?
You know, I over the couple of years, there's been a lot of beers I've tried. A brewery in Orlando called Red Light, they released this side faucet, whatever, side pull faucet series, and they did one of a Czech style Pilsner, and I just love that beer. I love lagers, I love Pilsners, I love I love the German ones, I love darker ones, but for some reason this one just hit in a way when I had it at that time. It was shortly after I learned about the Luker side pull from Matt Nanthi at Odd Breed. He had done the Farmhouse Pilsner, and I found this. It was like super cheap at Fat Tap Beer Bar when it was still open, and I brought it home, and I went back like the next day and bought like 5 more bottles of it because it was just so fucking good. God, man, if everybody could just start, but more people it's caught on the trend of doing, Luker side pulls and like Pilsner beers and whatnot. That was the beer that I really just like, if I could have that every day of my life for the rest of my life, I would love that.
Great.
First
Great
of all,
answer.
I didn't know that Red Light was distributing any bottles down here. I'm going to have to look for that. But my question is pretty quick, and it is about like journalistic integrity and or actual laws and rules. Is it a law that you have to disclose if you are given something in a review, or is it just that you have to disclose paid money that has been given for a post?
So, I would have to consult with a media attorney, which I do know, the guy by the name of Frank Lamonte. I consult him on a lot of things and have since I was in college. It is common practice to label something as a review. It's also common practice on a lot of websites now since the GDPR passed a couple years ago to outline exactly what you're getting out of it. Like if there is some kind of like affiliate link to you, or if there's some kind of, usually that like what websites will do though is they'll bury that at the bottom. Mm-hmm. But like because it's legally there, but like the user doesn't always read it. But there should be a disclaimer. I don't think if there's any kind of law, that's what I would assume would be that, but I would definitely consult.
But it's just good practice.
Well, but I do think that there probably is some legality to that. Okay. I'm not a lawyer myself, and a lot of times when questions like that do come up, I have a guy that I go to. Because, I'm a journalist, but I do know that there is a line of like media law, and you should consult professionals on stuff like that.
Yeah, I just knew, I knew that there's something about that, and I wasn't sure if it was related to products being given or if it was solely about monetary exchange. Like if someone paid for a sponsorship post of some sort, as opposed to if like Kevin gave a blogger some beer, if they have to disclose that.
I mean, I think it's sort of gray area. There's a lot of websites. I know even in the beer industry, there are websites where like, I know the guys who work for the company, but not the actual website itself. They charge thousands of dollars for write-ups about their brewery, and it's like they'll call them the hottest brewery in Florida, and it's like, okay, how much? And I know that they paid about $2,000 because I can at least hypothesize that based off of other things I've been told. Look, I mean, even where I work, we get the founder of my company publishing Forbes all the time. We pay for that. And we pay to get him, so there are websites that are pay to play. Unfortunately, not all readers and users of things are educated on that kind of thing. And I think most people kind of read between the lines. Like, more people are smarter than you think, but not everybody, man.
So, Mike, we're going to do last calls, I believe. Is there a fast food related question that you guys have to ask Joe?
Joel.
All right, Joe. So let's say you have been out interviewing breweries and getting the scoop and putting together some good posts, and you are full of check pills from the side pull faucet, and now you are hungry and on the way home. You pull into Taco Bell. What is your go-to order?
The chicken chalupa meals, man. 2 chicken chalupas with a soft taco.
That's a man who knows what he's talking about.
It's like he knew this question was coming.
I'm going to reveal that we did not cue him up that question was coming, but it was like that. That was amazing.
Yeah, the Uber Eats sometimes, I'll wake up the next day and be like, oh, fuck, did I order Taco Bell again? Just waiting out there in the front door. Yeah.
He didn't hesitate. No no.
No.
It was just immediate.
It's the most impressive part of the entire podcast, I have to say. Mike, do you want to queue up and dish out the last calls?
Yeah, so for those of you listening for the first time who might not be familiar, and also just to kind of refresh Joe, he knows what's going on, but last calls are the part of the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time, uninterrupted, unopposed, and to just say whatever. It doesn't have to be beer related. It can be about whatever. And that's just your kind of last call, your last stand for the episode. So, Joe, you are our guest, so we'll let you go ahead and have your last call.
Okay. If anybody ever listening here has never heard of the band The Replacements or Paul Westerberg, I highly recommend you check them out.
That's pretty concise and to the point. I love The Replacements, and they are definitely in my playlists. Joel.
Well, honestly, I kind of got nothing tonight. There are things I want to say, but I don't think they would help the show any. But yeah, I'm gonna have to pass on this one. Sorry to disappoint.
I've never has that ever happened before? Has there ever been a pass?
I don't think so. I also don't know if it's legal.
You know what? Is there a flag on the play? Referee? No, they're saying it's legal. I guess it's legal.
I'm gonna go to the instant replay.
I blame the CTE.
So Joe was short and sweet. Joel passed. Mike, you and I got to bring it. Who's going next?
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Ask and you shall receive, apparently. I will take...
Sorry, happy birthday, Bob Saget.
All right. Funny you say that, Joel. I am going to take a break. The last calls, I have taken the time to lambaste the ridiculous laws that our governor is passing and the just insane regression of social rights that comes with attacking people in the LGBT community and not being willing to talk about and help people with transitions and mental health. Don't worry. The next episode, I will talk about Roe versus Wade and the erosion of our personal freedoms in the name of religious doctrine. I will talk about that, no problem. But I want to be positive this week. Joe's got me in a really, really good mood. I want to talk about the fact that Norm Macdonald has a last Netflix special that is going to come out on the 30th of this month. My good friend Joel Codner is going to come over and watch it with me when it comes out on the 30th. And this was reported apparently in his living room because he was sick and was never officially recorded in a venue of some sort. And he's going to come over, and my good friend Ryan's going to come over, and we're going to watch this. And I miss Norm and Bob Saget and Gilbert Gottfried, some of the most brilliant comedians in the world. And the world is lesser because they're gone. And we're going to get together. We're going to laugh. There's also apparently a Netflix special where people like Jon Stewart are talking about George Carlin and Richard Pryor and Robin Williams that has just come out. We might have to make it a double feature that night and enjoy some really great comedy. And
the Carlin documentary. Sorry to interrupt.
What's that?
And the Carlin documentary. Sorry to interrupt.
and the Carlin document. By the way, you're not allowed to do that. You had your time. But still, I'm looking forward to watching that with some friends and really enjoy some really good comedy. We need it right now. And I have no idea. It could be terrible. It could be great. Doesn't matter. I'm going to enjoy it.
I'm going to be honest. I didn't really have anything queued up because normally we don't do last calls except for the guest on when we do guest ones. So I don't really know. I'm just going to say that's why I threw it to you to see if I could think of anything in this amount of time. I really couldn't. I'll just put this out there. Thank you to everyone who came out to our 7th anniversary at Copper Point last Saturday. By the time you listen to this, it'll be 2 Saturdays ago. But Kevin, one of those people who came out. You, your wife, your son came out, hung out with my wife and my sons on the patio. We had some beers and got to catch up a little bit in person, something that we haven't done in a little while, so that was quite nice. And from what I understand, a lot of people had a good time. We had a great turnout, a lot of happy people, and thanks for those who came, and thanks for just in general to those who have helped support us through. It's been kind of a tough last few years for businesses, breweries in general, and people like you have helped keep me employed through that time, and I'm grateful to those type of people. So yeah, that's really all that I have to say. But we will now, before we completely wrap up, Joe, go ahead and put out plugs for where people can find your site and social media and all of that.
Sure. Browerbeer.com is literally just go to browerbeer.com on your whatever browser you use. I know most people use Google. Instagram, Browerbeer. Facebook, Browerbeer. YouTube, still trying to build that channel up. And then TikTok, still trying to build it up as well. But basically, Browerbeer is the handle for everything.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for coming on. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that you touch on that I would love to talk about even more, because I'm very much into the integrity of journalism, writing, the integrity of our industry, the brewers, and people, keeping people honest. And this episode could be much longer if we had the time. So I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you guys so much for having me. And I would love to grab a beer with all of you. Kevin, I know you very well. I wasn't even aware that I was talking to a guy who works over at Coppertail. So I mean, like, I love the brewer.
Point.
Copper. Oh, sorry. So wait.
He's about to say, I think Copper Point shit, but Copper.
I know there was a problem with that years ago. But that's awesome. No, I do. I love your guys' brewery over there. I actually got married in Boynton Beach, not because of your brewery, but we got beer from Due South. I checked out your brewery because of that.
By the way, just so you know, Joe, you can't say the name Due South. Wait, I just did it. Oh, damn it!
Hey, I didn't even bother to go back and edit it out of the last episode. So
anyway,
kind of our running joke.
Yeah, and we all worked at that place at some point, all three of us, Joe, in case you didn't know. Joe, thank you so much for coming on, and I think Mike alluded to, maybe we'll have you back on. I only got through about half my questions in the first place, and I really appreciate what you're doing, and keep on fighting the good fight, man. Go out there and do the good work, talk with honesty about this industry. We need more of that.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate all you guys for having me on tonight and talking.
Awesome.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
All right, cheers, guys. Have a good night.
Cheers.
A big thank you once again to Joe Pye for coming on the show. This was a fun topic for me to talk about, and I would love to have him back on again in the future to talk more about this, because it's something I feel like I could talk about for hours at a time. Thanks to Joel and Kevin, as always, for taking time out of their busy schedules to record a podcast. Always appreciate them. And thank you to all of you, the listeners. I don't think that we get to say it enough. We really appreciate your listenership, for listening to the show, coming back, and continuing to listen to each and every episode. If we didn't have listens like this or listeners like this, we probably wouldn't be doing this anymore. But apparently some of you enjoy listening to us talk about the beer industry, and you care about our opinions and such. So thank you to all of you. And especially thank you to new people who have come on from recommendations from our listeners. We hope that you stick around as well. If you would like to hear a specific topic, reach out to us on our social media. We are at United We Drink on Twitter, at United We Drink Pod on Instagram. We're also on Facebook. Our website is unitedwedrink.com. You can fill out the contact form on there, or you can email us, info@unitedwedrink.com. If you want to support the show financially, you can go check out some of our sponsors and brands that we love over on our website, unitedwedrink.com/sponsors. There is amazing brands like Made In. Their cookware is fantastic. Liquid Death, water, Death Wish coffee, so many other things. Go over there, check those out. You can also buy a shirt, button, sticker, anything from our web store, which is unitedwedrink.com/store. All of those funds go directly into supporting the show, paying for hosting and all of that. We never pocket any of this money. We don't make anything. If we can just save some money ourselves and put it towards the hosting of the show, that's where it goes. We'll be back here in a couple weeks with another brand new episode. For Kevin, Joel, and Joe, thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.